Oh, come on, people! Can we not wait until at least Halloween is over before we start breaking out the Christmas decorations? After being given their next filler arc, new mission by the Star Princesses, the Precure, like us, were wondering what the heck was the Twinkle imagination. All the while, Fua was feeling a little antsy. Having gained a new form and power, she wanted to put them to good use, even if they were in the pursuit of one of the most vague fetch quests ever. Thus, the next day, she tried to convince Hikaru that she could help them with her more instantaneous transmissions. Did toys steal from the fandom? I'm not even joking here. Fwarp was a legit term being used by the Japanese fandom from what I could tell. Well, sad to say, the first official usage of the term was a bust as Fua fell horn first in front of Yeti's doghouse. As a result, she also ended up using a lot of calories and thus required nourishment from her little bit of product placement. That's right, kids! Be sure to bug your parents until they buy you this overpriced piece of plastic! Anyway, Fua further completed her transformation into an MLP character by managing to eat without actual fingers. Though I'm also pretty sure unicorns could eat with their magic. Damn, those guys were OP. Anyway, after having some ice cream for breakfast, geez, you're just begging to become diabetic. Hikaru and Lala took Fua with them to school, and even though it looks like they were halfway there, Fua chose now of all times to ask if they were going to look for the Twinkle imagination. I say this because, really, if Fua had just asked them to drop her off with Prune Soup, much of this week's main conflict may have been easily avoided. Then again, I guess we wouldn't have much of an episode now, would we? But yeah, now they had to deal with a riled up horse all day. At school, Lala and Hikaru's homeroom teacher was handing back their class's summer reports. Basically, little diaries they wrote throughout the summer to hone their writing skills. Hikaru's reports got the "it was very unique" grade from him, which probably means she got like a C or something. I mean, to be fair, this guy doesn't look like the type who would keep up with an ongoing magical girl anime like some people. But yeah, as a nice little callback, Hikaru wrote mostly about her team and their space adventures. Though again, I have to wonder how their teacher felt while reading all of this. Oh dear. Well, bet she gets this out of her system now before she starts to try and Naruto run into Area 51. However, because Hikaru had put all of her efforts into her report, she ended up neglecting several other summer assignments. Meanwhile, at the Note Raiders HQ, Darkness, pressed Ctrl-C, Ctrl-V, and gave the same old spiel, though he also took the time to again fix up Galogre's bracelet. So of course, after 2 straight weeks of embarrassing defeats, Galogre was going to prove himself by saying things out again and letting Kapard take things up for this week. Then again, he was the only Star Twinkle villain to make the top 50. A little more on that at the end. Back with the Precure, they were hating the books, and surprisingly, the alien girl who had never studied before in her life only had some incomplete math homework to do, while Hikaru again had dedicated too much time to her X-Files and thus had a ton of incomplete assignments. All of this is actually a nice little bit of characterization for the both of them that I'll talk about more at the end. For now though, Fua was still hounding them to help her look for the Twinkle imagination. She tried to help speed their assignments along and I guess messed up Hikaru's homework. Honestly, it doesn't look that bad and more like she had used her textbook as a coaster. Well, anyway, they also noticed Model Club passing by. Apparently, seniors like her and Elena were especially busy wrapping up their final year in middle school. Hikaru used a Japanese metaphor, even a cat's paw would help to describe their situation. Fua, do we need to buy you one of those barnyard animal spinning things? Of course, this led to your standard ET shenanigans with her almost being found by, "Hey, Sakurako, haven't seen you in ages." Well, anyway, both Madoka and Elena ended up turning down Fua's request to help look for the Twinkle imagination. Frustrated, Fua tried teleporting to Purunsu to help with his stuff, but again, she instead teleported to Yei's doghouse and ended up roping the old dog into her misadventures. She did eventually reach Lala's ship, where Purunsu and Uni were doing all they could to find leads on the Twinkle imagination, not realizing that they were likely in a filler arc because some toy execs wanted to get all of the star pens onto the shelf sooner rather than later. Uni jokingly said that she wished there was a magician who could solve all their problems for them. Gee, and here I thought the show had given up on calling back to Murayama's previous work. Actually, she went to see Ryo. Oh yeah, he did become a confidant of the Precure, didn't he? No joke, I legit forgot this guy had learned about the Precure secrets. Guess that kind of happens when you disappear for about 20 episodes. Anyway, the old geezer of course had nothing to offer. The Precure finally caught up with Fua. While Uni exchanged some introductions with Ryo, Hikaru understandably scored Fua for running off on her own. And unfortunately, Fua had entered into a rebellious phase of development and didn't take being scolded all that well. She tried to warp away again, and a concerned Yeti ended up going with her right into the lake. And hey, since this is a filler episode, we don't need a good excuse for the villains to find her and just have Kapard be there, because of course. Thus, even though he could just grab her, Kapard decided to follow the formula and use Ye to make his weapon of the week. Kapard, it's best not to take fashion advice from Kingdom Hearts villains, you know. To be fair, he wasn't a fan of it either. Still, he did use it to blow Fua away. Hey dude, wasn't your objective to capture Fua? Why didn't you just let her come to you? I mean, I know I made Pokemon references, but you don't actually have to weaken her first to capture her. Anyway, the Precure arrived and they all exchanged apologies with one another in a kind of rushed scene, honestly. I mean, it wasn't a bad scene per se, but I do have some nagging issues that I'll bring up later. For now, the Precure transformed while being surrounded by the slowest group of putties ever. Seriously, I did not edit this. And they engaged them with, "Oh wait, let me guess, it's mostly just a finisher fest, am I right?"
There's deja vu, there's language processing, there's deja vu.
To be fair, Hikaru did have a somewhat decent one-on-one with Kapard, even though the animation in this episode has been pretty bad. Eventually, Kapard, in spite of some of his counterintuitive tactics, did somewhat prove he earned his spot in the recent popularity polls by cornering Hikaru. This led to Fua rescuing her, though at least this time it was character arc related and not just a straight up Deus Ex Machina. With that, they used the Fua Cold Chant, yeah that's why I'm sticking with calling this attack, and defeated Kapard. Thus, the episode ended with Yeti sharing his gratitude with Fua, but oh no, Hikaru still needed to finish up her homework. Bear and Fua are back to the school, oh, but they ended up in front of the doghouse again.
Wah, wah, wah. Will you cut that out?
Much like most of Miharu Hirami's episodes, this one was a perfectly fine middle-of-the-road adventure. I mean, it was slightly above average, as they did give a little bit more development to Fua, but otherwise, fairly inconsequential episode. I will say, I like the little character moments sprinkled throughout this episode, like how Hikaru and Lala approached their homework. The latter, due to her established fascination with arts culture, tried to learn as much as she could by spreading out her assignment focus as evenly as possible. The fact that math was the one subject she didn't finish could be taken as a sign of her disinterest in the subject, as it might not be culturally exclusive to Earth. In direct contrast, Hikaru only focused on her reports because of her fascination with extraterrestrial life. Unlike previous outings, it doesn't paint her as outright stupid. As at the very least, she did still do the work. The problem is that she is narrow-minded, which ended up having a negative influence on Fua, as even pointed out at the end of this episode. Speaking of which, let's move on to the most divisive part of this episode for me. While she was a little annoying and Hinakino's performance is starting to grate on me, I do appreciate that Fua is actually developing a personality and not just acting as a Deus Ex Machina all the time. Her drive to find the Twinkle imagination, while somewhat noble, was also driven by ego, as she clearly wanted to show off some of her new abilities like a kid with a new toy. As a result, it did make her a little less one note, which is appreciated. All that said, let's face it, this horse has been kind of overexposed. I don't know, maybe it's just the placement of this episode coming right after 2 straight weeks of Fua Ex Machina, but this show is starting to feel a little too mascot character centric. Between this episode and Hikaru declaring that protecting Fua was their main objective, it does almost seem like they're propping up this character just to sell her plushie. The fact that I completely forgot about characters like Ryo, who early on seemed like he would have a bigger role, does kind of highlight this uneven spotlight distribution. Thank God Elena's getting an episode next week. But yeah, while I do appreciate Fua somewhat developing and the little character moments, I do think it's time we eased up on the plushie worship, instead focus on giving this arc some direction. I mean seriously, what the heck is the Twinkle imagination? If you haven't seen it yet, since I did upload it later this week, I just posted the first part of my thoughts regarding the recent NHK Precure popularity polls. It covers the top 50 songs of the franchise and how I found it to be a good, yet slightly disorganized selection. I'll shoot to release part 2 sometime later this week. Look forward to it. Until then though, for now my friends, and... you know, I think I just gotta take a quick trip to Nevada. Memes like this don't come around often.